To order. Welcome to meeting number 37 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on National Defense. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, February 23, 2026, the committee is meeting to study the impact of the Defense Industrial Strategy. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Before we continue, I ask participants to consult the guidelines on the table. These measures are here to help prevent audio and feedback incidences and to prevent the health and safety of our interpreters. As a reminder to the witnesses and members, please wait until I recognize you before speaking, and if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. I'd like to remind witnesses and the committee members that you may ask questions in either French or English, and if you need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. Again, all comments should be addressed through the chair. I'd like to welcome our witnesses now. Melanie Lucier, President and Chief Executive Officer of Aerospace Industries Association of Canada. Welcome. Congratulations. Mike Mueller, President and Chief Executive Officer, let me see if I get this one right, Alliance of Canadian Defense Companies. That would be Paul Solet. All right, well, let me go to this other one. I'll go to the actual form here. Merci beaucoup. All right, Air Montréal. Oui, Melanie Lucier, President and Chief Executive Officer. Aerospace Industries Association of Canada, Mike Mueller, President and Chief Executive Officer. Alliance of Canadian Defense Companies, Paul Siade, Co-Chair. And U15 Canada, Robert Esselin, Chief Executive Officer. Folks, welcome, and I appreciate you all being here. Mr. Lucier, why don't we begin with you? You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you very much for all les membres du comité pour l'invitation.
I would like to thank the members of the committee for the invitation. So what's Air Montréal? It's a cluster that contains 290 members that works in the aerospace industry across Quebec, and we're talking about 43,000 employees and people who are passionate about this industry across the province. Now, this cluster has existed for 20 years now, and we are the main hub for the aerospace industry in Quebec, which generates $22.8 billion in sales, and 2/3 of the country's aerospace R&D is done in Quebec, and 93% of the country's aircraft exports are also done from out of Quebec. Now, we're going to talk about the Defense Industrial Strategy, and the aerospace industry has welcomed the Defense Industrial Strategy because it represents a clear step forward for Canada. But unfortunately, for too long, it's been more difficult for some Quebec companies to sell their products to foreign militaries than to the Canadian Armed Forces. And the commitment to work more closely with local industry, particularly by anticipating needs early on, is indeed very good news for the province. But we are really going to closely monitor its implementation to make sure that the actions actually follow the words. So in this regard, we look forward to seeing the new Defense Investment Agency in action. Furthermore, the recognition of the aerospace industry's importance in the development of our defense sector is a major vote of confidence, and our industry plays a key role in several of the identified sovereign capabilities. It points to a bright future for our ecosystem, which will benefit the entire Canadian economy. In Quebec, we have 4 of the 10 capacities that have been identified in the strategy: aerospace technologies, space technologies, training and simulation, as well as autonomous and unmanned systems. The phenomenal success of Quebec's aerospace industry is all the more surprising given that we are fighting an uneven battle with the rest of the world when it comes to dual-use technologies, because they started using these many years ago. But everywhere else, actually, industries have benefited from lucrative local military contracts, which allow them to develop these products at the government's expense before adapting and transferring them to civilian aircraft. In Canada, Canada actually is the only country where companies have had to do the opposite, develop for civilian use at their own expense, then adapt these into military products. So Canadian companies end up paying colossal sums. So the strategy is welcome news in this sense. The success of our industry, despite the challenge I've tried to outline, is a testament to our extraordinary resilience and capacity for innovation, although it's sometimes under some conditions that are not as positive as our main competitors. So this won't be a surprise for anyone, but we believe that Quebec and Canada will need to build on the assets already in place across the country, not just in Quebec. So for future decisions, we need to make sure that we are relying on the major hubs, which we already have, the sovereign capabilities that we already have. So we have to really make sure to rely on these existing capabilities. The strategy and its implementation must, in our opinion, build on existing strengths rather than attempting to create new hubs or new locations or new groups across the country. So we need to instead really put our time and effort into the existing hubs and capacity. So in this regard, a dedicated aerospace strategy, similar to what Quebec has been doing for the past decade now, would be a huge asset in helping the ecosystem navigate the coming years. So it's really all about going all in on this front, in terms of the aerospace strategy. And I will conclude with some recommendations. Now, in Quebec, we have the Quebec Defense and Security Coalition, which brings together different stakeholders, the chambers of commerce, manufacturers, producers. And in this coalition, we actually have come up with 5 recommendations that are widely shared across the province. Some of these recommendations are already covered by the Defense Industrial Strategy, so leverage our areas of excellence and rely on the sovereign capabilities identified by the federal government, which largely align with these areas, including aerospace. Secondly, reform the procurement strategy to maximize benefits across the country, so the build, partner, buy approach, which has been put forward, aligns with this logic. But again, the implementation of this overarching principle will be crucial. So work must begin early with local suppliers when identifying needs in order to minimize reliance on the buy pillar and maximizing build. And we can talk about the other aspects when during Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Mueller, over to you. 5 minutes, sir.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the opportunity to appear here today. I'm here on behalf of Canada's aerospace industry, including the Quebec industry, which is a major engine of our country's economy and national defense that supports more than 225,000 Canadians and their families while contributing more than $34 billion annually to Canada's GDP. The release of Canada's Defence Industrial Strategy was an important and welcome milestone for our industry, one that AIC has long been calling for. This is a very important policy announcement, and I want to thank each and every one of you and your colleagues from all political parties for your support and encouragement for this very important document. The strategy provides a strong foundation and roadmap for strengthening Canada's defence industrial base and appropriately recognizes aerospace as a sovereign capability and strategic national asset. As Prime Minister Mark Carney recently stated, aerospace is amongst, if not the most important industry in Canada. We couldn't agree more. Canada's aerospace industry earned this reputation through decades of ingenuity, innovation, investment, and political leadership that recognize the importance of this strategic sector. Today, Canada remains one of a select few countries in the world with the ability to design, build, certify, and sustain complex aerospace systems and platforms. These capabilities are foundational to the readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces and to our commitments to NORAD, NATO, and our allied operations. Canada's aerospace industry already supports defence platforms, sustainment training, simulation, advanced technologies critical to Canada's security and global competitiveness. Canada's civil and defence aerospace sectors are deeply interconnected, relying on shared workforce, supply chains, industrial base, and innovation ecosystems. One cannot thrive without the other. That interconnectedness also makes aerospace a uniquely strategic dual-use sector where investments in civil aviation, defense, and space reinforce one another while generating broader economic, technological, and security benefits for Canada. If the government is serious about delivering on the strategy, and we feel they are, strengthening Canada's industrial base and translating commitments into capability for Canadians and our allies, the following priorities, in our opinion, should be addressed through a renewed and enhanced relationship between government and industry. And again, very pleased to see Pillar 1 of the strategy reiterate that. First, procurement reform and speed. We support the establishment of a standalone ministry with full responsibility and dedicated staff to ensure faster, more predictable procurement processes. The establishment of the Defence Investment Agency is an important step and should serve as a key pillar for executing the objectives laid out in the strategy. The agency has the opportunity to champion a more agile, responsive, and outcome-driven approach. For far too long, defence procurement discussions have focused primarily on being fair, open, and transparent, without an equal emphasis on outcomes. In today's environment, procurement systems must also be efficient, effective, and timely. Timely delivery is itself a strategic advantage and can help deter potential threats. Secondly, long-term demand signals and industrial certainty. Companies invest, scale, and retain talent when governments provide stable long-term procurement visibility and policy certainty. That includes creating opportunities to build in Canada where domestic capabilities already exist, and ensuring procurement planning supports long-term industrial development objectives. And finally, supporting innovation and industrial scale-up. Canada has a skilled workforce, advanced technologies, and the industrial expertise required to compete globally. The federal government needs to continue to work with provincial governments on a national skills program to ensure alignment, including from universities and colleges, on industry objectives and needs. Government also has an important role to play as a first buyer, helping de-risk, validate, and scale Canadian solutions while providing innovative companies with the credibility needed to compete in global markets. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the strategy represents a strong and important foundation, but strategy alone will not determine success. Execution will. The opportunity now is to move quickly from strategy to implementation, converting policy commitments into real operational readiness, industrial strength, and economic growth for Canada. Canada's aerospace industry, from the very small to the large, stand ready to partner with the government, the Canadian Armed Forces, to help deliver these objectives. Thank you very much, and maybe I'll just make a final offer. We're heading into the summer season, and we'd love to have each of you tour one of our facilities. We're located right across the country. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Mr. Asselin, over to you for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada's defence industrial strategy arrives at a consequential moment. The international environment that shaped decades of Canadian prosperity and security has changed profoundly. Great power competition has returned. Trade, technology, and talent are increasingly being used as instruments of strategic leverage. In this environment, Canada cannot assume that the capabilities we need will always be available from others when we need them and on terms that serve our national interests. That is why the defense industrial strategy matters. It recognizes that defense policy, industrial policy, innovation policy, and economic security can no longer be treated as separate files. If Canada is serious about sovereignty, resilience, and operational readiness, we must build more of the capabilities that matter here at home. The central question is this: will Canada simply spend more on defense, or will we use this moment to build lasting technological and industrial capacity? Our view is that the answer must be the latter. Sovereign capabilities are not built on spending alone. They are built on the architecture which enables partnership. A truly sovereign capability requires depth across an entire value chain, basic research, applied science, engineering, manufacturing, and the highly qualified talent to sustain it. Canada has real strength to build on. Our leading research universities are among the most important assets in Canada's innovation system. They generate the ideas, talent, technologies, and partnership that underpin long-term competitiveness and sovereign capability. U15 universities conduct nearly $9 billion in research each year. They are also deeply connected to industry. The private sector invests roughly $900 million a year in research at U15 universities. Canada's challenge is not the absence of research strength, it's the weakness of the interface that connects that strength to defense outcomes. Collaboration between defense, university, and industry happens, but it is too often small-scale, episodic, and bespoke. We lack the standing mechanism that will allow Canada to move from research to testing, validation, demonstration, procurement, and deployment in a predictable way. The data are clear. Canada allocates less than 5% of federal R&D spending to defense, compared with an OECD average of roughly 21%. In the US, the figure is above 50%. Even within Canadian modest defense R&D effort, only about $40 million annually flows through higher education institutions, less than 1% of federal support for university research. In the US, by contrast, roughly 15% of federal academic R&D expenditures are defense funded. This is a structural gap. It means Canada is not yet making full use of some of its strongest national assets, its research enterprise. That matters because early scientific leadership is a predictor of downstream technological advantage. Canada has built world-class research strengths in areas directly relevant to dual-use innovation. For example, since 2015, over 11,000 researchers at U15 universities have received $188 million in federal funding research for research into uncrewed and autonomous underwater systems, working over 350 partner organizations. Il s'agit également d'un enjeu économique.
This is also an economic issue. Defense industries are R&D intensive, but Canada has not converted that intensity into sufficient domestic innovation capacity. Since 2014, Canadian defense industry revenues have increased by roughly 55%, while R&D investment has grown by only 11%. That is not the trajectory of a country building the technological depth required for a more dangerous world. Canada's allies have learned this lesson. The United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and France have all built mechanisms that connect universities, industry, and defense missions. Their systems differ, but the lesson is the same. Successful defense innovation depends on standing interfaces, mission-driven portfolios, and clear pathways from research to deployment. The defense industrial strategy creates the opening to build these mechanisms. The test now is whether we can move from principles to operating models. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, merci.
Thank you.
Paul Siade. Sorry, take this off. Over to you for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and honorable members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. Je m'appelle Paul Ziadé. Je suis ancien.
My name is Paul Ziadé. I'm a former professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Calgary and the co-founder and CEO of North Vector Dynamics, which is a company that's based in Calgary. We are proud to be building Canada's first and only full-spectrum air defense company that is Canadian-owned and controlled. We focus on anti-drone, counter-drone missiles that are precision-guided. Today, I'm here in my capacity as the co-chair of the recently launched Alliance of Canadian Defense Companies, or ACDC. ACDC has about 200 members, and they cover such areas as sensors, cybersecurity, AI, and the space industry, which gives ACDC a cross-sector view of Canada's defense industrial base.
Prior to the launch of ACDC, the Prime Minister argued that sovereignty depends on Canada's ability to withstand pressure and build strategic autonomy. That is also the logic of the defense industrial strategy. The strategy makes it clear that we are no longer content to be a passive consumer of other nations' defense systems. This is not only a government position, it reflects a broader public expectation. ACDC recently commissioned a national poll that found that 82% of Canadians believe Canada should defend itself without relying too heavily on other countries. It also found that 74% want Canadian-owned companies to supply Canada's defense equipment and technology, compared with less than half who say the same of foreign companies operating in Canada. Among seniors, the preference for Canadian-owned companies reaches 90%. ACDC's members agree with Canadians, and we strongly support the shift from reliance to resilience and the vision of moving from buy to partner to build. As Canadian-owned builders, ACDC's members believe the definition of a Canadian bidder under the new Buy Canadian policy must be tightened. There is a fundamental difference between Canadian assembly of foreign-controlled systems and Canadian-owned firms that develop and own proprietary Canadian intellectual property. For that reason, I would propose to you that the government integrate sovereign alternative assessments into procurement decisions. When perceived capability gaps exist, procurement authorities should explicitly consider the long-term strategic value of emerging Canadian-owned and controlled vendors. We also suggest a sovereignty fast track within the Defense Investment Agency, or DIA, a dedicated stream to acquire defense technologies that are ready for fielding or close to operational validation. That brings me to the second issue. Canada must become its own best customer. For too long, Canadian businesses have had to explain to allied customers and governments that yes, D&D helped develop our products, but no, Canada is not first in line to buy it. We must move faster if Canada wants to see homegrown firms scale into the champions the DIS envisions. Now is the time to move from words on a page to orders on the books. The DIS targets 70% domestic acquisitions and more than $5.1 billion in annual revenue growth for Canadian SMEs. Those targets are not achievable without procurement reform that puts Canadian companies first. ACDC recommends 3 practical measures. First, allow SMEs to benefit from expedited procurement by removing or significantly lowering the current $100 million threshold for DIA-led procurements. Second, ensure that Canadian-owned and controlled companies, including disruptive, innovative SMEs, are designated as strategic partners for sovereign capability areas. A strategic partner framework that designates foreign-controlled firms as sovereign capability development partners undermines sovereignty. Third, implement sovereign production guarantees for strategic SMEs. This can give companies the demand certainty required to secure financing and build domestic manufacturing capacity. Le Canada possède le talent nécessaire.
Canada has the talent to defend itself on its own terms. What it needs now is a procurement pathway that turns Canadian-developed defense technology into Canadian-fielded capability. That is what we're asking you to support. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're going to go with our first round of questions after 6 minutes, and we're going to start with Mr. Kibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are through you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here and supporting Canada's defense industry, and more importantly, those in uniform. That's making it hard. Mr. Chair, the Defense Industrial Strategy is a 2030 or even 2035 onward instrument, but the operational reality and requirements are right now. Canadian Armed Forces members in the National Capital Region were recently directed, that was on May 13th, to return field kit because of critical equipment shortages. 2,000 Canadians are in NATO leading a brigade, and Russia has threatened, they're in Latvia, and Russia has threatened Latvia at the Security Council last Tuesday. The U.S. has paused the Permanent Joint Board of Defense last week with the Undersecretary of War saying, quote, a strong Canada that prioritizes hard power over rhetoric will benefit us all. Canadian press reported Pentagon has given Ottawa a classified paper laying out priorities for a collective North American defense pact, and that in the words of a senior U.S. defense official, Ottawa did not deliver a credible response. They also cited the F-35 delays as another major irritant. And the point I'm trying to make is that the U.S. defense industrial base needs allied production capacity that Canada can credibly provide, including 155mm shells, propellant, energetics, missile subcomponents, counter-drone technology, et cetera. So I'm going to start with a soft question for Mr. Zayde, just to warm you up for our panel. And specifically looking at the immediate operational needs of Canada. I understand Ukraine and our allies and in fact, our own personnel over there are all eager to see modern battlefield disruptive munitions, and I'll refer to North Vectors, hypersonic or drone intercept missiles. And they'd like to see these in their inventories, perhaps more importantly, as I said, our Canadian men and women. So as a small business from Western Canada, what do you need to see from this government to quickly build and deploy and train this sovereign capability to Europe, as I said, for this critical need right now?
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, I'm going to answer the question as the CEO of North Vector Dynamics, but also as I believe that my views reflect those of the ACDC membership as well. And I think fundamentally, what we want to have is a very close relationship with our men and women in uniform. A lot of these new defense companies that are popping up across the globe, not only in the United States, but in Europe, they have this concept of the forward deployed engineer. So actually having engineers from these SMEs, from these defense companies embedded with our warfighters, and to get to develop the capability alongside them to take their feedback and then iterate very, very quickly in a matter of days and weeks instead of years. And so this is definitely something that we are hearing very loudly from our membership, is that we are ready to work with the CAF. In addition, and I think what any SME in this space will say is that we need very, very strong signals from the government. And these signals include contracts and fast contracts as well. The most efficient use of taxpayer money is actually contracts, not grants, because we as disruptive SMEs then take these even relatively small contracts and multiply them by 10 and 20 even in the private markets. And I can tell you right now that there is a lot of private capital that wants to come in and support this defense renaissance in Canada. And so strong signals and strong integration with our Canadian Armed Forces.
Thank you very much. And for Mr. Mueller, what partnership infrastructure does not exist today that needs to be developed in the next 12 to 24 months to bridge between current operational reality and the long-term Defense Investment Agency aspirations? If you could give me a couple quick specific instruments.
Thank you for the question. Very encouraged by the Defense Industrial Strategy, the Defense Investment Agency being stood up. I think some of the work that still needs to be done by the government to, again, give industry that long-term credibility is defining out the sovereign capabilities very specifically. We're very pleased to see aerospace as one of the listed sovereign capabilities, but that industrial mapping that goes along with that to ensure that we are supporting the industry in all the different regions of the country tied to the procurement. So that procurement map, again, we've been in a transactional approach for procurement the last 10 or so years. So getting in place that strategy and then the pieces flowing from that, which will give the certainty of the industry, is absolutely required.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Lucia, would you agree? Or
Yes.
would you wish to add comment to that?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to add actually to what Mr. Ziadeh said, representing a lot of SMEs in Quebec, so 230 SMEs. There's always a chicken or the egg effect. So do I get my first contract and then get my certifications? or do I get the certification, which is very costly and very long, then to get the contract. So we need in both cases to either secure the contract in advance or help the SME get the certification that they need to play in that new field. So that would be my first answer. And then like the translation part between being a civil talking to the army, talking to the people in force, you need experts to do that. There's a lot of people retiring from the army right now. We need to be able to get these people to work in the SMEs, but they will need support to be able to access to this talent. So that would be my 2 cents on, especially the SMEs.
Thank you. No, Mr. Kilbo.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mr. Watchorn, over to you for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, puis merci à nos témoins.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. I've had the pleasure of talking with Ms. Lucier and Mr. Mueller at many events. Now, it's not going to be a surprise for either of you that I would like to talk about Mirabel, the industrial cluster in aerospace. So Saint-Hubert, Montreal, and Mirabel, these are the 3 hubs we have in this field. So we had an event with SMEs to help them orient themselves in terms of future military expenditure and how to integrate them into the supply chain. So I'd like to hear from you what you think about how we can best include them in this chain. Well, I'm actually maybe going to repeat what our colleagues have already said. Mike was talking about this. So we need sovereign capabilities that trickle down into concrete needs and capacities, and companies need to decipher all this, so they might need a bit of help with that, and they need predictability as well. It's a lot of investment. It's a heavy burden in terms of their balance sheet and their finances, so they need predictability. SMEs are also saying that it's not necessarily low-interest loans and other mechanisms. They need contracts, as we were saying. They really need to get that first contract and test the waters. And you talked about Mirabel. Of course, it's an important innovation hub. So integrating innovation, R&D from the early stages will help a lot in terms of developing the intellectual property here with the smaller companies.
Maybe just to complement what my colleague had said, a lot of opportunity right now. Very encouraged by the Prime Minister's focus on defense. Again, the defense industrial strategy, some of the announcements today on some of the policy pieces, very encouraging. What we're encouraging, though, companies is to make sure that they understand the defense supply chain. This is, money isn't going to be falling from everywhere. Companies really need to identify and take a look at the strategy. More work needs to be done on the strategy to identify where things are going, so that companies can take a look at that. But again, there's high barriers to the defense side of things. You have cybersecurity pieces, AS9100, security clearances that have to be in place to be in this. So again, very important for government to come alongside those companies, especially the small, medium-sized companies right across the country. Contracts are important, but a lot of these pieces need to be in place in order for companies to contribute to the broader defense play that's happening right now.
Thank you. Moi, je vous soumettrais que la stratégie.
I would add that the defense industrial strategy is actually already in play at Mirabel. A couple of contracts have been announced. The first one is the maintenance contract for C-330 Huskies. So it's many millions of dollars for 2 companies. Another contract that is around the corner. It has to do with the upgrading of helicopters. So there's also Global Eye, which is coming up in the near future. So the bigger challenge maybe is labor for some of these companies and SMEs. So what do you think about that? Will companies need our help so that they have access to labor to fulfill these contracts? So I'll go ahead and answer. Now, the Quebec industry is actually has had contacts in terms of this question. We have national schools, 2 of them actually. We rely on them. So for the first time in many years, we don't have capacity at these schools. But we will need more. So we do really need to quickly increase the capacity for technicians in avionics, but other trades as well that are relevant. And you need to make the industry, the sector, attractive for people. We have done a lot in aerospace, but we will need to sell the defense industry to the general population so that people choose to go into this industry, and parents maybe talk to their kids about this. So we will need to promote the industry, and we have to make sure that we have the capacity at our schools and retain people, because some, of course, will be retiring. Therefore, we need to be able to preserve the skills in our industries. Immigration will be part of the answer as well. In Quebec, we have 65,000 workers. In about 10 years, we will need additional thousands of people without taking into account defense contracts that might be coming down the line. So we need all of these components.
Maybe just on a national level, again, couldn't agree more with what my colleague Melanie had said. Prime Minister, again, has set an ambitious goal, 125,000 new workers in the defense industry, which we applaud and celebrate and support. But there's going to have to be the corresponding training that comes along with that. We were also encouraged the recent budget update from just a little bit ago, the focus on skilled workers. The issue with a lot of our workers is that they're not red sealed. They're through different mechanisms, through other national certifications. So maybe a recommendation would be a little bit more focus on that in order for our companies to take advantage of some of those pieces there. I would also say greater alignment with the provinces, the universities and colleges for the demand on industry side of things. So doing out that continuum between folks wanting to come and get the training, but ensuring that there's a job at the end of the day. And so we have some work to do, coordination, collaboration across the board. But again, the signals are being sent in the right manner, which we're encouraged by.
Thank you. I was watching, appreciate it. Monsieur Gabriel Sainte-Marie, over to you for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you, Chair. I would like to welcome all 4 of our witnesses. We are lucky to have you here. It's quite rich in terms of the content, and I will take a moment to say hi to my colleagues. I'm replacing my colleague today. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share this moment with you. So my questions initially will be for Ms. Lucia and Mr. Mueller. Now, before talking about the defense industrial strategy, I would like to start by talking about the importance of having an aerospace industry that is really the economic driving force of added value in Quebec. It represents a lot of jobs. It's our first biggest export in Quebec, and Canada is the only country that has an important aerospace industry without having an defense industrial strategy. Now, I asked a question to Mélanie Joly. When you look at the departmental plans, the government has 9 industrial strategies. You have defense, you have automobiles, AI, quantum, genomics, but there is no strategy for aerospace. Now, before the last elections, François-Philippe Champagne promised that this would be introduced. So are you still asking for a strategy specific to this field? Mélanie Joly didn't seem to be really aware. And how would you assess the importance of having a specific strategy? Thank you very much. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for your strong support for the aerospace sector across the board. There's so many nuggets in your question that I could go off of, but the need for that broad aerospace strategy absolutely still there. Again, very encouraged on the defense industrial strategy, very supportive of the government and the implementation of that. But as I said in my remarks, there's the dual-use nature, especially very, I think, maybe more unique to aerospace than others. A lot of the innovation, a lot of the cross purposes, the skilled workers, again, very much doing a lot of the same work. So that national aerospace strategy, and I think you pointed out, there's strategies on AI, quantum, all these other pieces. We do need one for aerospace, so that's something that we're still pushing the government for very aggressively. And then your comment just on exports, it's absolutely critical. 80% of what we do as an industry is export related between civil and defense. So the strategy to focus on that export piece, absolutely critical. And again, it's the continuum from innovation to first buyer on the defense side, on the civil side to certification, and then to export. You need that full continuum for the aerospace sector. So we're looking for a strategy to address both the defense side and the civil side.
Puis si je peux ajouter, depuis plus de 10 ans maintenant, au Québec, on a une stratégie nationale, une stratégie provinciale.
In Quebec, we've had a strategy for more than 10 years for this field. Now, what it does is it offers predictability, which I briefly talked about. It allows you to focus as well. It's as if you have a set of marching orders, so everyone pulls in the same direction with the same objective in mind. It also sends very important signals. Not having a strategy, I think, harms things a lot, because you have many companies who are headquartered internationally outside of Canada. So one of the questions they end up asking is, will this province, this country, have the necessary mechanisms that will accompany the industry? Without a strategy, these questions are unavoidable. So it's also about the messaging, not to be overlooked. It's very, very important, in addition to the concrete measures, of course, which are welcomed by companies, but it allows people to stay connected, stay focused and engaged, because conditions can change over time in such an industry that is very important for the region. Thank you very much. Now, when it comes to the defense industrial strategy, both of you talked about dual-use technologies. When you look at other countries who, with a significant aerospace strategy, Ms. Lucia, for instance, the United States, the development of a device, of a technology will be done in the defense industry often, and then there will be a transfer towards the civilian industry. But here, yes, there are procurement strategies, and aircraft, for instance, will be purchased, or equipment will be purchased, but it ends up being very costly. So the defense industrial strategy, do you think, will it be able to correct course, and will it allow the development of new technologies? It will allow us to compete on a level playing field with the U.S. and others. So contracts can take place in the military side of things first, and then the transfer will be towards civilian use. So this would be a generational change, but good messages are being sent with the DIS. It's also about the capacity of developing these technologies here in Canada. My colleague was saying that when you develop the IP yourself and the products yourself here, well, you are creating a lot of wealth. So the strategy is sending the right signals. But once again, the execution will have to be very clear. We need to be clear with our intentions, because we cannot do everything. We will have to make choices. But once the choices are made, the communication will be very important.
Side, it's important to point out, responding again to the needs of industry. We have the Borealis framework that is in place in the defense industrial strategy. Again, encouraging, but it comes down to the execution of that. We see a lot of the programs that aren't moving at the speed of industry, and so how do you reduce the complexity of the programs? How do you ensure that, again, on the innovation side, you can bring that to market, whether that's on the defense or the civil side? Have government as first buyer, have Transport Canada timely certification, and then for export eventually. So innovation side of things, huge opportunities there, and that straddles both the defense and the civil side, which is why we're encouraged to see that. But we do need more on the execution side, more coordination, more response to the industry's needs. Shorter timelines, less.
And shorter time at this point. I'm sorry. Great dialogue, I have to admit. Mr. Anderson, over to you now in our second round. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and all my future questions will be through you. Mr. Ziad, I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Ziadi? Okay, Ziadi. I love the acronym, by the way. I got in a lot of trouble with that acronym associated with it in my younger days. Academic after academic and expert after expert that's come to be in front of these committees is they've all mentioned either gray zone warfare, they've mentioned pre-kinetic warfare. Some of them have said that we're in 1913 in a situation similar to that, or 1939, just before the two world wars. All of them have used the term war to describe the situation we're in right now. And what that means to me is that there is a great deal of haste in rearming our forces right now. So given the apparent urgency of rearming, and especially if we want to rearm with deterrence rather than war fighting in mind, would you support buying off the shelf initially to rearm for operational needs?
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah, as my colleague said, I don't think we can do everything and immediately, right? I think we can do everything or nearly everything in Canada because, as I mentioned, I spent 10 years as an engineering professor. I know what our STEM talent can do, and there is absolutely no reason why we cannot make some of the world's best precision-guided missile interceptors or quantum computing technology. But to directly answer your question, yes, this is not a black and white position that we take as ACDC, where it's like we must buy everything Canadian and immediately so. But I think before we find ourselves in the next situation where we urgently need something, I think right now we can start planning. We have a lot of very innovative companies that are kind of sitting at this technology readiness level of 6 or 7, fairly mature and need that acceleration.
If you don't mind, I've only got 5 minutes here, so I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Mueller.
Yeah, so I think it really depends, and that's why we've been calling for that defense industrial strategy to get away from that transactional approach. We had a strategy 10 years ago, identifying out the sovereign capabilities, making the investments on the innovation side. You could do things differently. In aerospace, it's a globally integrated supply chain and industry, and in some cases it makes sense to do it right here in Canada if we have that strength. In some cases, the build, partner, buy, it makes sense to buy. But I think for me, it's the outcomes. Are we creating jobs here in the country? Is that IP transfer coming, maintenance, repair, overhaul?
Yes, what I'm
pieces?
getting at, though, is there seem to be two separate problems. Rearming our forces, and we're conflating the two of them in this discussion, rearming our forces and making it Canadian-owned. There are two different things here. We need haste in rearming right now. We don't have that capability. We may have the capability. We may have in the longer term, but in the short term, we do not have it. It took 30 years from development, over 30 years, to develop the F-35. If we start from a perfect situation right now, we're looking at 30 years, 2055, before we actually have this thing. We don't have that time, or at least the academics we've talked to say we don't have that time. So we're faced with two separate problems. Would you say that we have two problems here that we're conflating?
I would say there are two problems. It's an issue for sure. When you take a look at the sovereign capability, the government should be defining out what can we do immediately right now, what do we need to buy off the shelf, and what's the benefits to the Canadian industry through that process. And then maybe some of the longer term pieces, we won't need it in a little bit, but how can we develop the industry here in Canada? I think of drones and things like this. We're world leaders on that. And we have the capability to do some of these things. But in aerospace, we can't do everything. We got to rely on our partners, absolutely.
And Ms. Mueller, Ms. Lucia, sorry, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a matter of timing. What we cannot do now, we might have to buy, and that's okay. Making sure that a lot of the offsets are coming back in real investment, though. That's the important thing. But also we can already send that demand signal that we want to be able to build that in the future. So start working now and time it. So you can say, yes, we're not going to be able to do an F-35 for the next 30 years. Do we want to buy? Do we want to build it?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. Okay. Next round. Ms. LaPointe, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Monsieur Ziadé, j'ai vraiment aimé plusieurs.
Mr. Ziadeh, I really liked a lot of the points you talked about in your remarks.
The study have talked about the importance of regional industrial capacity. And in Northern Ontario, for example, we have strong mining, advanced manufacturing, automation, and dual-use technology expertise. But companies often feel disconnected with the defense sector. It's not a field they normally play in. In your opinion, what needs to happen to better connect regions like ours into Canada's broader defense industrial strategy?
Yes, thank you. I think there's a role to play. The supply chain is very complex in defense, and I think even some industries that are not traditionally considered to be traditional defense industries can play a part. I think it was mentioned earlier about just the and this applies not only to SMEs but non-traditional defense companies. Just what is going to be required for them to be able to participate in this defense renaissance that we're going through right now. And I think a term that I use a lot is that it's more than just rebranding, right? I think there is a lot that is required from government, from industries, from experts to help them get through all of this certification and the regulatory piece, because it's a very complex environment. But I think the government is hitting on all the right notes with the defense industrial strategy. But I think, yeah, I'm sure some of my colleagues have some interesting points to make on that.
Yeah. And for a country our size, where do you see the right balance between the need to work with trusted allies and the need for domestic capacity, particularly in areas tied to national security and critical supply chains? What is that balance?
Yeah, so I mean, I can give you my own perspective. I think, in the long term, we can do a lot more than we currently do. That is absolutely it. But, the build partner buy framework is precisely that, is that we cannot immediately do everything that we can. But to touch a little bit on a previous question is that in this urgent moment that we find ourselves, there's a lot more that we can do now because the technologies of 21st century warfare or defense or deterrence are not these 10, 15-year projects. They are in autonomy, in cyberspace. And so these are things where we can much more quickly ramp up. We've seen our allies do it, even in Europe, which is traditionally not known to be a very fast-moving jurisdiction. They have a lot of very exciting companies right now selling to their armed forces in record time, and we can do that as well. So I think we can bring up that proportion much more quickly than probably a lot of people think is possible.
Thank you. Mr. Mueller, because Canada's aerospace sector is so highly integrated into allied supply chains, particularly with the United States and with NATO partners, and as Canada expands defense spending and industrial capacity, where do you see the strongest opportunities for Canadian aerospace firms within those allied ecosystems?
So thank you for the question. A zero-for-zero trade framework for aerospace is absolutely critical across the board, and we've had that in place since 1979 WTO rules. So very encouraged by the government's push on new free trade agreements. I think of all the work that Minister Sadu has been doing across the board. I think of Mercosur as one of the key markets that is happening right now. So there's opportunities everywhere in the world. We strongly support the Prime Minister's push for Europe. I was just in Budapest talking about the EU SAFE agreement that Canada is now a part of. So large opportunities in Eastern Europe. Again, Canada is blessed to have an aerospace industry that can think of, design, certify, sell right across the board, both on the civil and the defense side of things. And we need to continue to double down on that and continue to have those free trade agreements allowing us, continue to give us access to some of these defense frameworks that are happening. It's not a easy ride sometimes, but having the government open those doors, either through free trade agreements or through some of the funding mechanisms, is absolutely critical for our industry. Again, global in nature, and we need to be a part of that.
Madame Lucie, est-ce que vous voulez ajouter des commentaires?
Ms. Lucia, would you like to add some comments? As my colleagues were answering the questions, I was thinking about all of the companies that over the last number of months have had contacts with us. Of course, these are all very interconnected, and these supply chains takes years to build with the U.S., yes, but with Europe as well. So it's not desirable to undo these linkages because given the importance of our relationship with the U.S., 70% of what we export goes to the U.S., so we absolutely have to preserve what we have had for decades now, which is to say zero tariffs, because you can have a piece that goes in an aerospace production process crossing the border 7 times, up to 7 times. So there are opportunities in that sense.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Lucia and Mr. Mueller. 2 quick-fire questions. First, to replace the Auroras, the defense D&D gave the contract to Boeing to the United States. So we found out that it's delayed by about 3 years. Do you think that with the new DIS that could be revised, or is it already too late to buy Canadian in this case? And Ms. Lucia, in your opening remarks, you said it's easier to sell to other countries than to sell to the Canadian Armed Forces. So should the national strategy also take care of that? I'll start with the second question. Historically speaking, some countries, especially SMEs, have been telling us it's easier for us to sell to other armed forces than to the CAF. But the strategy is sending very encouraging signals. Now they tell us that, okay, we can now see a path and we're being accompanied, and I referred to this briefly, they can be integrated into these processes. So it's not just a willingness, it's a complete switching around of things. For contracts that are already given or will be given out, now, I, of course, have members who are in the supply chains, but we are closely following to make sure that there are industrial and technological benefits that are really invested in Canada. So we will try to make sure that this is the case for every contract. So when we have to buy, we will be looking to see if there are benefits that will be reaped here in Canada. So we'll try to make sure that we are able to multiply the benefits from these contracts and bring as much as possible to the country. Mr. Mueller?
Contracts that are ongoing, can't speak to. I think it'd be probably better to talk to the CAF or PSPC on some of those matters. But again, industry requires that long-term certainty piece, and I think on all these questions, that's really why we've been calling for the need for an industrial strategy. Is there going to be bumps along the road implementing that strategy? Absolutely. But again, if we would have had a strategy 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I think a lot of the challenges that we're seeing on different pieces would have been addressed. The big piece that we've been looking for is, again, getting away from that transactional approach. How do you bring together industry and government together to have these conversations earlier in the requirement setting cycle? So very interested to see, again, how the Defense Advisory Forum is going to be structured. We're looking forward to having a seat at that table to make sure that we're bringing together industry and government. But I think it's got to be very focused. It just can't be another box-checking exercise for government. It has to have some meaningful discussions taking place with industry. So problem sets coming to industry giving advice to the government, and government being held accountable as to why they are taking the advice or maybe why they aren't taking the advice. So we have a lot of work to do across the board on some of these things. But again, encouraged in the right direction, but we have a ways to go still.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Kibble, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Ziade, I appreciate your comments about Canadian expertise and innovation, and I couldn't agree more. However, do you think that this committee should consider recommending that the government formally propose to its allied partners such as UK, Germany, France, and Korea an immediate framework for an interval of lend, lease, training, and co-development agreements to bridge between current Canadian operational requirements and the long-term 2030, 2035 DIS deliverables? So briefly, yes or no, and what would your organization be able to collaborate and contribute to such a plan to address that short-term challenge?
This is thank you for the question. I think it's an interesting idea. I think we'll have to see what the membership thinks of that. I think it kind of bridges that gap, right? Because we are touching very strongly, or we're trying to send the message very strongly that the IP ownership is very important, right? I think if Canadians are to get on board on the long term, that we need to spend more money in defense, they need to see the economic benefits come back to them. And that in the 21st century is through IP ownership. It is not just solely through job creation as well. And so in terms of what our organization can do, we do not charge any membership fees. We are very lean, so right now, but we are very happy to help with the thought leadership and even get the opinions of our wider membership.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just pivot a little bit and focus on the Permanent Joint Board of Defense being paused in Mr. Colby's challenge. And this should be a wake-up call, I believe, to all Canadians. So where can Canadian defense production add value that helps close, and I'll give this to across the board. I'll start with Ms. Lucier, if that's all right. Where can Canadian defense production add value that helps close the U.S. production capacity shortfall, and that in doing so lets our country answer the Undersecretary of War's challenge with capability rather than rhetoric? And if I could start with Ms. Lucier.
Absolutely. I don't want to say we can help anywhere or everywhere, but almost, because like I mentioned, like the supply chains are really well intertwined. So most of my members have clients in the States or our suppliers already. So we can provide, and that's one of the message that we're always saying, like in Quebec, we can do an aircraft from A to Z, but also not aircrafts, but helicopters, drones, etc. We can certify, so we can help in all the fields needed by our allied.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Would you care to comment on that?
Very highly integrated defense supply chains across the board. There's a lot of Canadian companies that have direct contracts with USAF, as an example, the United States Air Force. So keeping those linkages very live. But I would say critical minerals. I mean, to me, that is sort of the low-hanging fruit that is there. Absolutely critical for the development of aerospace products. We're a world leader in that. So again, encouraged to see the DIS having some sort of a focus on that. But again, it comes to execution and having those discussions across the board. We have the capacity, we have the ability to do a lot of these pieces. And again, I'm having weekly conversations with my counterparts in the U.S., so there's a lot of collaboration there and right across the world.
Thank you. And Mr. Ziade, from your organization's perspective, the same question.
Yeah, I would echo my colleagues' remarks here. I think we can do quite a bit right now in definitely upstream in the supply chain. Critical minerals, I think, is an immediate opportunity where we can definitely contribute.
Perfect. And how much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
54 seconds.
54 seconds. Very quickly for Ms. Lucier, I'll jump back to my initial question where I was speaking about allied partnerships to deal with the short term, not the long term. So briefly, yes or no, do you think that we should be doing these potential lend-lease training co-development agreements in the short term for the gap?
I think we should do it, and it provides that opportunity to include IP, Canadian IP in foreign projects. So UK did it terrifically with the F-35 and having BAE system as part of the aircraft, and they sold after 166
You're waving a hand, Mr. Mueller. Would you agree on the same context there?
Our industry is built on collaboration, so absolutely critical. I just think of certain opportunities that are out there. sixth-generation GCAP. The earlier you get into these programs, the more opportunity Canadian companies have to both contribute, develop IP, and be part of these long-term solutions that are going to be serving our allies right around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Mr. Chair.
Thank you both. Our witnesses, Mr. Mallette, over to you now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. I know a lot of you took time to come here from CANSEC, and speaking of that, my first question will be directed to Ms. Lucier. Today at CANSEC, and I'm sure you're well aware, the Prime Minister announced that Canada is entering negotiations to procure Saab's Global Eye platform, with major opportunities for Canadian manufacturing, innovation, and skilled jobs tied to the project. This is projected to support more than 3,000 jobs as it runs out. So in your view, how important are initiatives like this in positioning Canada's aerospace and defense sector for long-term growth while also strengthening Canada's contributions to NATO and continental defense?
This is part of the good signals that are part of the strategy, like when we can and when we have the capabilities here and we are willing to do it, let's do it. Again, I'm not going to comment, is it better to go with that route than the other routes? Like, it's okay, like we're going to follow, once a decision is made, and predictability and now having a focus is certainly well welcomed by the industry, because they know now that we have a project or a potential project. So we welcome more, I would say, the predictability, the previsibility than the announcement themselves. Wow, we're super happy anyway.
And the same question then to Mr. Mueller as well. You know, in terms of the signal it sends, I guess, to the industry.
Signals are very important. Again, not going to comment on that particular one, just because there's a
asking
contract,
anybody to say yay or nay on the
But I think
exact
the Prime Minister's announcement from this morning on ITB's very good. You know, increased multipliers to drive certain outcomes. Again, it's the outcomes piece, beneficial to the larger companies, but also the small, medium-sized businesses to drive those outcomes. The strategic partnership framework, again, haven't had a chance to digest that fully, but again, putting these signals out there, absolutely important. And then I think there was a previous question, too, about how do small, medium-sized companies take advantage of this? The concierge service, we've been dealing a lot with ISED on that. So great opportunities there also for a lot of these small, medium-sized businesses to determine how are we going to get into some of these supply chains on maybe the announcement that the Prime Minister had made, because there's opportunities in whatever platform is chosen for the supply chain right across Canada. So again, very encouraging signals from the Prime Minister today. Eager to continue working with him and the government and officials as they're developing these pieces, because again, the execution is very much what we're looking at and looking for.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned that concierge service for some of the smaller pair-ups, because right in my riding as well, we had a very small-ish contractor who had just been running into a brick wall trying to, he's just signed on with General Dynamics for, you know, and again, it's the kind of stimulus I think we want. So, so back to you as well, Mr. Mueller, on that theme. Many Canadian defense firms are innovative SMEs, and some as small as 9 employees, as I've learned with the group that I was just referring to. So what specific policy tools do you think, aside from this concierge, or anything more we can do to help scale up and participate more effectively in procurement?
So ITB, absolutely critical for the small, medium-sized businesses to take advantage of some of the pieces that are there. Again, pleased to see a focus on innovation, because the innovation side of things is what drives the jobs and the spillover effects, perhaps to the civil side. We have examples of that with companies. On the concierge service, I will say a big focus of mine on that is the outcomes. It can't be, again, another bureaucratic box-checking exercise. And if companies are going to be going to this concierge service, there has to be ownership over the issue they're trying to solve. Because in a lot of cases, you see everything being bounced around. Well, that's PSPC. Well, that's Treasury Board. Well, that's Defense. Oh, you got to go to the CAF. Oh, you got to go to ISED. And so how do we encourage government to take ownership over some of these pieces? And again, the Defense Investment Agency, we see a lot of potential in that and strongly encouraging them, again, take ownership, more folks, again, being able to see folks through the continuum of aerospace in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Millet, Mr. Milieu. Mr. Anderson, we're back to you again.
Thank you very much. I'll start again with Mr. Zayed. The recent trade show, Saha trade show in Istanbul, Canadians sent specifically under the DIA, sent a trade delegation there. We got there, and the purpose of being there is to sell Canadian goods overseas, something I think, in my opinion, we should have done decades ago. The government should have been behind this. However, we got there, and I think, much to their surprise, the Canadian delegation found that they had a mixed message. They are trying to get foreign governments to buy into our industry and buy our wares, but at the same time announcing that we're going to keep 80% of our supply chain Canadian. So it's a mixed message. We'll please buy our stuff, but we're not going to buy your stuff. How, in your opinion, how should we reconcile that message, and what should we be saying at these trade shows overseas?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think this is a complex one. Defense procurement is quite complicated. Where we're not the only country that looks to onshore a lot of the manufacturing, for example. But you see countries like Sweden, and they have Saab, Norway, they have Kongsberg, right? These are world-class companies. That they have very deliberately supported through various policies. So I think we can probably reconcile these two things to an extent, right? These are not mutually exclusive. I'm sorry?
They're not mutually exclusive?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Mueller, could you answer the same question?
So I agree. Our government representatives traveling around the world should be promoting Canadian aerospace in particular. We've heard the examples in the past where you have government officials soliciting foreign companies to try and bid on to give some competition here domestically. And
what kind of message are we sending, though, if we're saying that we're going to buy, that we want them to buy our stuff, but we're not going to buy their stuff?
Well, I think the message is if Canadian government is not buying Canadian, why should others do that? So again, in aerospace, we have certain niches that we need to double down on. We can't do everything. So where we are strong, we should be purchasing that domestically, promoting it internationally, and building those collaborative relationships across the board. So again, I don't think it's one or the other. It's not a zero-sum game. You can be doing both, and we should be.
Okay, and Ms. Lucia, would you agree with that?
Yeah, for several years, I've been doing trade shows with companies, and we're always doing that, both selling our products and say, yes, we're going to buy first, but we're going to develop our industry first, but then we won't be able to do everything. So there's a buy portion in the strategy that makes it a non-issue, I think. We can do both.
Okay, let me return to this. We're doing these things, and as you said, the messaging, we're talking about messaging here. We're messaging to companies. The companies aren't the only ones getting the message, though. Foreign governments are getting the message, our domestic voters are getting the message, and so on and so forth. Are we taking steps that are long-term and structural right now that are going to deter the next administration next door to us from trying to repair some of the trade relations that have been disrupted? Good question. Are we taking long-term structural, are we creating long-term structural destruction to address a short-term problem? What might be a short-term problem? Yeah.
The American industry is the one talking on our behalf. Like when we had like the crisis on tariffs, the American Association was more vocal about the quality of the relationship that exists in aerospace with Canadians. So I don't think we're like
Government is not the aerospace industry, though. That's the trouble.
no, but like it's still like they're passing the message, and I think they're getting it through, right?
But I think maybe that's a better question for the government. We're just seeing the outside. But from an aerospace perspective, we've been very grateful to receive carve-outs on aerospace. And it's due to the fact that aerospace in the U.S. is in a trade surplus there. So huge opportunity. They see the benefit for the global integration that is happening. So again, I think a focus on building up the domestic industry is a good thing from my perspective. Again, not a zero-sum game, as I talked about before. Going internationally, finding new markets, absolutely critical. But I agree, we cannot ignore the Canada-U.S. Relationship and the integration of the supply chains there. So our encouragement to the government and all parliamentarians is preserve that relationship, preserve the linkages both on the civil side but also on the defense side, while continuing to go and broaden out our agreements internationally.
I hope our government is actually listening to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Idlout, over to you. 5 minutes.
I lost track of time listening to all the great testimony. Thank you so much to each of you for sharing all of your expertise. I've learned so much about the great work that you all do. And such a diverse group of witnesses from different areas. So I think I only really have one question. What I love about the defense industrial strategy especially is Pillar 5, because it talks about making sure that they'll work with many others to ensure inclusive, sustainable, and geographically balanced approach, especially regarding Arctic and northern security. So my question maybe, and we can start with Paul to Robert to Mike, then to Melanie, what needs to happen to ensure that Indigenous peoples are included in growing the domestic defense sector?
So I can tell you that even we count among our members within ACDC several Indigenous companies, and there is enthusiasm across the board, not just in defense and aerospace, but also within our various communities in all parts of Canada. I think definitely where we're seeing a lot of activity and interest is where it comes to development and testing, right? Our partners up north, for example, which is one of the key priority areas in the defense industrial strategy, they have a lot of knowledge on how to navigate the terrain, and we want to be part of the solution and the defense of Canada alongside them. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities on that front to engage and to even co-own some of these solutions together.
I'll just comment briefly to say that there's a huge depth of expertise on research on Indigenous issues, but in the Arctic, groups of researchers that have been going there for decades. This is just not starting now. There's a group of researchers from Laval, for example, Université Laval, who have been in the Arctic every summer for the last decade, working in Indigenous communities with them as part of almost their communities, and working through all the dimensions of the stuff we're talking about, including social ones. So I think your question is really important, and the message I want to convey is we're not starting from scratch. We have a lot of expertise inside our universities on these topics.
So huge opportunity. When I think of the labor force, even before the Prime Minister's ambitious goal of 125,000 new workers, 50,000 projected need for increased workers in the aerospace field over the next 10 years. So tapping every resource, every community is absolutely critical. And I think, too, the investments that the supply chain is making in some of our member companies that are Indigenous owned, absolutely critical. And very substantive, high technology pieces that again are driving more innovation and creating more jobs right across the board. And then when I think of the north, aerospace connects the north. There's a lot of communities up north that would not exist, at least with the standard of living now, without the aerospace sector. And so, again, we're in every region of the country: maintenance, repair, overhaul. We have a lot of our member companies touching those communities up north at every turn. So we need workers in every region of the country. So huge opportunity there.
Si vous me permettez, je vais faire ma réponse en français parce que c'est un sujet qui me...
I will answer your question in French if you'll allow me, because I'm really passionate about this question, so I want to be as precise about diversity and inclusion when it comes to the Indigenous peoples. Of course, there is such richness that is not fully exploited. When it comes to women as well, that's an issue in aerospace. In defense, we don't have as many women as we should, so we are encouraging women to choose professions in aerospace and defense. We cannot deprive ourselves of the talents of SMEs. We have great companies, big companies, but SMEs are key players that represent diversity. So in remote areas, there could be people who are removed from these circles, from these opportunities, so we need to reach out and find these people. Of course, we spoke about this. We will need 65,000 additional workers in the next 10 years, so we cannot deprive ourselves of any talent, Indigenous talent, feminine talent, or SME talent. So I am very, very interested in this, and Minister Joly announced a program to help us, Aero Montreal, to bridge the gap and help the companies to make it into the defense industry. So it will be a pleasure for us to continue to focus on more inclusion and diversity.
Thank you. Monsieur Sainte-Marie, back to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Ms. Lucier. There's the Defense, Security and Resilience Bank. And now I'd like to congratulate the government on succeeding in having that bank in Canada. Montreal is one of the candidate cities to have the institution. Now, we talk about AI, naval technologies, aerospace. So we have everything that actually will tie nicely into this new institution. Now, for your hub, what would it mean for you to have the bank in Montreal? Now, we already have some international organizations in Montreal, of course, but I will nonetheless support the candidacy of Montreal for the defense, the new bank. Aerospace is there, as you mentioned, so it's an opportunity for us to exchange quickly and show some examples. So we would really be able to implement things quickly, and that proximity, of course, would be a boon for the aerospace industry, and the impacts on our cluster will be quite significant. So we are the leaders in Quebec and Montreal of sustainable financing. So in addition to the ambitions of this new investment bank, we could also get the opportunity to invest in a sustainable fashion, and it really makes sense to have that in Montreal. Now, would your members be able to play a funding type role towards SMEs? Yes, I mean, this will impact, of course, all stakeholders in the chain, including the big players and hopefully the SMEs. Any investment into the big players will, by definition, end up benefiting SMEs because these are integrated into the supply chain globally, but in Quebec and in Canada as well. So, of course, all investment will benefit, and it will trickle down. It will benefit the entire ecosystem. So if I understand it correctly, the physical proximity, being able to go visit facilities, make connections quickly, that will make a big difference? Yes. I mean, this is something that we already do, actually. Could you please... Yes, it's the organization that regulates. It's a UN agency that we have in Montreal, and we work with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. So with regard to the certifying different pieces of equipment and anything in aerospace, actually. So we invite them to our facilities, show them what's doable, what's possible. So hopefully that influences future policies in terms of regulations for civilian and other types of flight. So it's something that we already see with the different organizations. There's an immediate effect, and Canada will be able to influence, and of course Quebec will be able to do that too. So we hopefully will be able to impact their future actions.
Wants to give you more time. Is that correct, sir? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to thank our witnesses for coming today. Apologize for only showing up here at the end. I had to speak to Bill C-31 in the House and wanted to talk about the Defense Investment Agency Act and the changes to the Defense Production Act, which does provide, if you actually have a chance to read through it, provides some powers to the minister that will actually limit competition on bids. It will give the minister power to reduce the ability of some companies to be disqualified by the minister without giving any reasons. There is no chance of minister is essentially given immunity from any possible litigation or challenges to why he would disqualify someone or rig the competition process by moving all sorts of exemptions. There's one thing to use a national security exemption with proper reasoning because of time that we're in with conflict and great operational requirements. It's quite another to disqualify companies that they don't want to bid. It's two different streams that we have to be concerned about. So just first and foremost, have any of our witnesses had a chance to read Division 16 of the Budget Implementation Act, Bill C, Part 2, which is Bill C-31? Anybody?
At a very high level, we've looked through it, yes.
Yes. Mr. Mueller, I encourage all of you to read it in detail, have your lawyers go through it, and be prepared to appear at the Finance Committee, or if we can split this off and bring it to Defense, that would be a better idea when it comes to committee study. Can you, one thing that we've always been critical is that, one thing that we need is certainty in procurement. And the best way to get certainty is to sign contracts. So, Mr. Ziadi, can you talk to the fact of how many of your member companies have got contracts signed in the last 12 months from this government?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, we represent a wide range of companies. Most of them are SMEs, indeed. We have not collected that data yet. We are still a very small and nimble organization. But if that is of interest, we would be happy to collect that and report back to you.
Mr. Mueller, in the aerospace industry, how many contracts can you report have been signed by the government?
I wouldn't have an exact number, Mr. Chair, but I know that there have been some. But there have been other announcements where there's a lot of negotiations going on.
Like we heard also today at CANSEC, another announcement, another negotiation, but no actual contracts. We don't know how much has been spent. We don't know what is actually going to be delivered as to AWAC, something that we all support getting. And I'm, rather, agnostic on what platform we use, but let's just get it bought, and that's something that the Air Force has identified that we need. So on the SME side, this is always, in my time on this file, I keep hearing from our entrepreneurs, our innovators, how tough it is to do business with the government. So, Mr. Ziadi, can you provide us with some examples as well as some solutions on how we ensure that SMEs are getting opportunities to bid, build, and benefit, and bring their innovations to the forefront to benefit our Canadian Armed Forces.
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. So we've talked about ITBs. I've heard about reforms today. I have not yet had a chance to digest that. What I want to stress is that ITBs are only a small part of a defense industrial strategy. So the best way that we can support our SMEs is definitely to provide that strong signal and certainty. And these include contracts for relatively early stage companies. We can find ways to contract with innovative companies with enough off-ramps for the government in case they do not meet certain expectations and validate their technology along the way. So also denoting Canadian SMEs as part of these Canadian strategic partners that the DIS suggests that they are going to announce sometime this summer, right? It cannot just be foreign multinationals with a presence here. We well. And as I've mentioned before, we need to lower that DIA threshold as well, because in this 21st it is not, we cannot go through these 10-year procurement cycles. These things need to happen in weeks and months. And so we need access to the DIA, which is supposedly supposed to accelerate defense procurement. And so right now, as far as we know, the threshold is $100 million. That needs to be reduced for SMEs to meaningfully participate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. McKelvey, welcome to our committee. You have up to 5 minutes.
Chair, and thank you for welcoming me here today. My questions are for Mr. Asselin. Perhaps no surprise, as I am also on Science Committee, and we are also looking at dual-use research there as well. So as you're aware, central to the government's defense research strategy will be Borealis. And Borealis is the Bureau of Research, Engineering, and Advanced Leadership and Innovation in Science. And I was certainly very excited to see in Budget 2025 that there was an investment of $68.2 million over 3 years to accelerate delivery of advanced technology, align federal innovation, and connect partners from government, academia, and industry. So my question to you is, can you speak to the state of readiness and expertise of our Canadian academic community and their ability to accelerate innovation and drive dual-use research?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So maybe on Borealis, to be absolutely frank with the members of the committee, so far it's a concept. It's an empty shell. There's nothing there. I would say even pretty underwhelming in terms of what has been shown to date. It has been decided that it would be under DRDC, which is the defense branch inside, or the federal lab inside defense. And the early sign is nothing will really be different from before. So it's just a new entity channeling current programs, but I would just urge members of this committee to maybe follow Borealis implementation very closely, because so far from the leading research universities, it's very disappointing in terms of the interface and the promise that was communicated, because I think the concept was good. It could have been a Canadian DARPA or a version of DARPA, but so far it's not. So I want to raise that flag. In terms of our capabilities, I think, I've spoke to the data, what we represent in terms of the capabilities in the research community. We have, as a country, the chance to have this expertise, this intellectual capital. And, today's discussion has been focused on procurement and the end of contracts and how it works, but we're not going to have SMEs, we're not going to have companies in defense if we don't have the talent and the research and development that will bring these companies to be competitive globally. So, again, I would urge the committee to think about the foundations of success for R&D intensive sector that represents the defense industry, and really focus on the investment that will make this happen. I think we need to build these interface, these pathways. They don't exist between our universities and the Defense Department right now, and this is what I'm working on with my group.
Great. So absolutely agree. I think we're very much in early days, and it is exciting to see the academic community wanting to step up and come to the table around that. So one of the things underway, though, is the launch of the Defense Innovation Secure Hubs. And this is underway, and it has a strong focus on AI, quantum, cybersecurity, amongst other things. So can you speak to how past federal investments that we've made in the pan-Canadian AI strategy, in quantum, how have these really ensured that our researchers are leaders internationally, and how they are ready to step up in Borealis, step up with the DISH strategy, and really work on those collaborations with our defense industry?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Again, not to be too discouraging, but to give the sense of scale, the DISH that have been announced are 50 million over 2 years, and there have been 2 or 3 announced. So in a scale of billions of announcement, very, very small, very limited in impact. I will also say it's not clear at this point. They will include their best researchers in our universities, so it's mostly federal lab focus. In other words, scientists who already work for the government. I guess that for me, that would be another flag. And then on the technology level readiness, these DISH are set up to be at the really end, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is fine for testing, prototyping. But again, we need a pipeline to get to these technologies at the end in this defense industrial strategy. You cannot just put something at the end of the chain. You have to work upstream, and I would argue this aspect is not in the DISH right now.
And you mentioned Canada's 5% versus the United States 50% for research and dual use. Can you speak to how broadly they've cast the net on that definition, and maybe how broadly we should cast that definition here? I will note things like the Superfund sites for environmental contamination, naval bases, Air Force bases, research on cancer, because it was a major outcome for military personnel. So I think the United States has cast that net very wide in the definition of dual-use research. What should we be doing in Canada as we embark on this early journey that we're starting on around Borealis and others?
Great question. Just to say, to your point, DARPA in the U.S. funds biotechnology that led to the RNA development of vaccines that saved us for the last pandemic. Very broad, very broad view of technology development, and I would urge again this committee to really focus on that. This is what we're trying to do as a country, is to develop technology that will be Canadian-owned, Canadian-developed, that will come from our talent, our researchers, transfer into our companies, that will be grown here and scaled here. But if we don't connect all these things together, sure, we can change the rule of procurement, but at the end, we're not going to be able to scale our companies, I think, the way we want. So I would really agree with the premise of your question that we have to have a broad portfolio of research. It's not just defense, or military use. It's broad use. But I would say credit to the government. The 10 capabilities that they have put forward seems to be broad enough to have a broad portfolio.
Thank you, Mr. McKelvey. We're going to our last round of questions, and I do want to give us about 5 minutes at the end to talk about something else. So I'm going to go to Mr. Kibble, Ms. Raminato, Monsieur Samari, and then present at the end, and if we can try to keep it tight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Zaid, you spoke earlier, Zaide, sorry. You spoke earlier about the need for stability and decision making to support and spur on innovation and production. I heard that comment, and right now the Liberals are still standing up the Defence Investment Agency and, of course, the Defence Industrial Strategy, but without, as we've heard in testimony, the embedded strategic threat assessments in those plans, and without consideration of pre-kinetic threats that we're facing right now, and indeed without a national defense strategy, surprisingly enough, that would guide economic strategic and efficient procurement planning. So in your opinion, when in the context of stability, is this harming the stability and because we've got this laundry list of shopping that doesn't really seem to have a plan? Is that impacting your decision-making within the industries that you represent?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we definitely need to move a lot faster. I think you're talking about stability with the United States, or?
And we have a laundry list of things that we're buying, but we don't have a national defense strategy. We haven't considered pre-kinetic threats, so we're going to follow this way for a while and then that way. We don't have that overall guidance, and you said you needed stability, and I think that would bring stability. So your comment, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with you that we are in a state of a pre-kinetic threat. I agree with that. I think most Canadians do not realize how real the danger is. And so we need that, from the stability perspective, we need, again, these very strong signals from the government and a sense of urgency. And I think all of my colleagues here would probably agree with that.
Mr. Mueller?
So I think I was at this committee about a year ago, and I was arguing for a national defense strategy that identifies the threat, that then informs a national or a defense industrial strategy that then is operationalized through perhaps a defense investment agency. The government has done it the other way. They created the Defense Investment Agency, then the strategy. I do think that defense strategy identifying the threats is still a missing piece. Again, very encouraged where the government is going on this, and we're going in the right direction. But that threat piece to inform the sovereign capabilities.
I agree with you that we wouldn't be able to actually go anywhere without that. Ms. Lucier, would you agree as well that that's a critical component?
I think we need to be super clear, especially for the SMEs, especially for the researchers, especially for the companies that are looking for clear demand signal, because we need predictability in the long run. So specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Hassel. Would you agree? Yes. Thank you. The parliamentary budget officer's cost of the announced 3.5% minute, $33 billion a year, $159 billion by 2035, 2036. And what the committee we have not are aware of, it would help us, and there's not really a fiscal roadmap in without this national defense strategy. But and maybe you could help us with, is a national inventory, and I'm going to ask you, but to help us establish it, that we would need this across the country. But if you could provide your input on a national inventory of what we have. So specifically from your respective vantage points and your industries that you represent, does Canada, what do we have today in numbers of firms, workforce, and sectoral capability that your members represent? And I'll start with Ms. Lucier and go across, and then we'll just give us a snapshot that's here at the table and show the need that we should probably be well aware of for the entire country, because we don't have this critical inventory to help, again, bring that stability. So, Ms. Lucier.
So part of the announcement that was made a month ago from the program that Minister Joly announced, there's a portion of money that's reserved to do that mapping of capability in Quebec. So we're going to be able in the next coming weeks to be able to know how many firms, whether they can provide, what the equipments they have, and what they can provide as services.
In a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Your
Axia is working on it. Yeah, we're already working on it for several months now.
You have? Okay,
so,
good.
Yes.
So we're going to have that framework, and you would agree,
For
Mr.
Quebec,
Mueller?
anyway.
For Quebec, Mr. Mueller, yes?
I think we need to expand that out right across the country. That's one of the asks that we've had to government. I've called it a capability mapping exercise. Yeah. So sovereign capabilities connected to the procurements, and we're missing that.
Thank you. This is happening in Quebec, not from your perspective, Mr. Ziade, from the organizations that you represent.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we are actually very closely tied to two organizations. One of them is called the Icebreaker, and the other one is the Council of Canadian Innovators, and they actually did a national survey of defense and dual-use companies. And so I would be happy to connect you with them, because they have a lot of data on what are our current capabilities in the SME landscape.
Okay, so really quick, I'm sure we only have a few seconds left, but then, because there's all these different sources, some being done in Quebec, other places not, different organizations. Yes or no, do you think we need a government-led framework, not framework, but map and inventory that is all one-stop shop place of our capability to support an actual realistic strategy? Because without it, it seems impossible. So would you agree?
for the R1, and it can be
But do
deployed
we need
across
it
the
nationally is what I meant.
It can be deployed across the country, of
Okay,
course.
so we need a national list.
If it's led by the government, my fear is it's going to take too long, and it's going to. So let the industry
okay.
define themselves and push it.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, and don't take too long as well?
Yeah, quickly.
Mr.
everything.
Aslan, you would agree?
Execution.
I will just say, Mr. Chair, that for research, we are able to tell you on every sovereign capabilities how many U-15 researchers are working on each capability. So that asset mapping for research exists.
Is that just within your organization or for all institutes?
Well, for the 15 leading research universities, yes.
I understand Mr. Kibble wants that white glove. You're welcome. He wants a white glove approach. We get it. We need to have speed and expedite these matters. And that's where I'm going to Mr. Eminato now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. So a lot of information provided with us today. So I just want to I don't want to call it cleanup, but I just wanted to just make sure I wrap up a lot of what was shared today. There was a question with respect to the $100 million threshold for the Defense Investment Agency. I know that when Mr. Guzman presented to us at the National Defense Committee here in April, there was a question on whether or not that was a hard line, and that decision, I think, was to have a number to start with. Now that the DIA will be up and running through the Budget Implementation Act and gets its legs, I think, once proof of concept and so on starts rolling, I anticipate that number may change. With respect to the people, each one of you has talked about the people that work in the defense industry. So I have children that are serving the Canadian Armed Forces, and as much as I want every Canadian to consider a job in the Canadian Armed Forces, not everyone will, but I would love to be able to convince people to consider a job working in the defense industry. All of you have mentioned that there a huge need for people to consider work in that field. In the budget, we talked about expanding Canada's skilled trades training to reservists. And I wanted to get your opinion on that in terms of reservists perhaps serving in the Canadian Armed Forces, but also perhaps working in the defense industries that will allow them to also share that expertise in terms of what is it that they need with the actual defense industry employers. So it's a win-win-win, and I'd love to get your opinion on that. Puis, Madame Lucier, on a parlé un peu des femmes dans la...
And then, Ms. Lucia, you talked about women in the defense industry. I was with women in defense and security this morning, so I can reassure you that I am doing everything in my power, within my powers, to encourage women to go into this field. So can we work on this component? Can we rely on reservists to encourage them to serve their country? Now, we are trying to accompany companies. Now, it would take some HR policy changes to be able to do that, because, of course, they want to know what the best practices are, how they can hire from this pool. But, of course, there's a lot of knowledge that is held by these people. There's a lot of skill, as I was saying. We cannot deprive ourselves of any talent, so we need specific measures for companies to accompany them, and every company, every province, every region of the country needs to do this, because we should not be depriving ourselves of any skill or any group.
I would agree. Anything that's a win-win-win, we're open to, and again, tapping some of those untapped resources, labor market is absolutely critical. I just think of aerospace in particular, very attractive, high-skill, high-paid jobs. The numbers may be a little bit dated, but 30% higher wages than the average manufacturing. So again, encourage everyone to take a look at aerospace. Huge opportunities there. In any way that the government can help support building in that pipeline of Canadian youth or anyone that wants to get involved, we'd be supportive of.
And Mr. Aslan, we talked a little bit about the dish, and perhaps one of that element can also expose some young researchers to perhaps consider a field working in the defense industry. Would you say that could be something, an element that we could also add to the dish in terms of exposing young people to possibly considering jobs in the field?
Well, right now, DISH is only secure environment research. Just to give you a sense, GPL lab that does the robotics research for NASA. This is very sensitive technology. They do 80% of their research openly. So this notion that we have to be inside the room with full security on every part of the research that we do is not certainly one that our allies do. There's certain areas where we need to, obviously for sensitive reasons, and I protect us for IP theft. But I will say at the end of the day, I think my message today to you is if we don't create these pathways, these interfaces between academia and the Defense Department, we can create these dish and these secure environment, but they're not viable long-run pathways that I think will yield the results that we want on research. So they are an important niche, but they're very small in scale, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Monsieur Saint-Marie, over to you for a few minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, pour...
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mueller, Ms. Lucier, could you talk to us about the importance of the aerospace industry within the DIS? Well, I'm going to talk about the importance of it for the province. We have very important companies in aerospace in Quebec, MDA, Reaction Dynamics, who will be able to launch missiles with new technologies. So the importance of the aerospace industry, well, we need to maintain good relations with our neighbor to the south. Of course, we had the Artemis mission recently. We are talking about major economic benefit, and we're talking about making space more open and accessible. But there's a talent component as well. This is stuff that makes people dream. So there's a whole pipeline that we need to fill out. When we talk about the space industry, we are encouraging people or piquing their curiosity to start exploring these areas. So it's economically very important. It's very important for research because there's a lot of research in the space industry that can transfer to other areas. Robotics, we have seen that with Canadarm. So we should not be neglecting this sector. Yes, we talk about aerospace, but within that we have the space industry, the space sectors, and Canada has long been a pioneer in that sense, and we need to remain pioneers, and we need to maintain good relationships with other countries. Mr. Mueller?
Just to give you a bit of perspective on the potential for the space industry here in Canada. Again, world-leading companies right across the board. I think of Magellan Aerospace out in Winnipeg doing phenomenal things. They're predicting space economy to be worth $1 trillion by 2030. So huge opportunity for Canada to get involved in that. It's around $500 billion today. A large portion of Canada's expertise, again, low Earth orbit satellites. Again, they're predicting 25,000 new satellites to be launched. And again, you just look at, as Melanie had said, the Artemis 2 launch and Jeremy Hansen, who I've had the pleasure to meet. It's inspiring, and there's a lot of spin-off effects that are happening. So huge opportunity for the industry across the board.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Bazin, back to you, and we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll bring it home. How's that? Mr. Aslan, on the research side, how do you rate DRDC, Defense Research Development Canada, on the work they're doing, and are they working close enough with industry to get the stuff built that we need?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So it's a very small part of D&D overall. In terms of capabilities, I think we have to be frank that they've been neglected as the Defense Department has been on funding for the last 20, 30 years. They've been working on technology development at the end of TRLs, so 7, 8, 9, 10, very niche. I will say the weaknesses, as far as I can tell, there are episodic collaboration with academia, but not at scale. The scientists who work there, they are career scientists in the federal government. They don't necessarily, come from like U15 universities, for example. So they do good things, but I would say in terms of scale and whether the research is consequential in terms of technology development in Canada. I think these are good questions.
So would there be opportunity for academics, for SMEs, and the entrepreneur and innovators that are out there working alongside with DRDC in DRDC facilities? Particularly, we have this big space sitting out in Suffield where DRDC is located, an awesome location to test some of our new technologies. Do you think that's something that we should be recommending as part of the Defense Industrial Strategy report?
So, Mr. Chair, I think it's an important part of the research continuum, but one, as I said, that is really at the end when the products are almost ready to be launched at the commercial level. And the problem with that, if you only focus on that part of the continuum, is you don't have the pipeline that will get you the products at the 8, 9, 10 level. And this is where I feel we're weak, because academia is not really being asked to contribute, or has not been to this date. We're working to change that. But you need a better fulsome pipeline of research that comes from TLR1, fundamental research. Like, I would just remind this committee, AI came from fundamental research. It was not directed research. And so sometimes it's just curiosity driven. That goes all the way to what DRDC does, which is prototyping, testing at the end of the chain. But I would say just focusing on what the RDC does on the research side would be largely insufficient, in my view.
Okay, so from an SME standpoint, Mr. Zeri, what opportunities are your members looking forward to work more closely with D&D in particular? Maybe it's the RDC, but we have this problem that the government of Canada, the bureaucracy is risk adverse. How do we get them to be those early adopters to take on some of the risks associated with some novel ideas?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Maybe if I can address the DRDC point, I think that's a good one because I have personal experience working with DRDC and at the Suffield research base that you mentioned. So very capable people. It's such a unique asset, not only in Canada, but worldwide. I can attest that I know companies from Europe wanting to come and test here. And as far as the ACDC membership goes, yes, they are looking for a much clearer path. We have some autonomy companies looking to test as well. So trying to find a much clearer and linear path to get into these facilities. And I can say that there are some excellent people working there because you have the DRDC Suffield Research Center and CFB Suffield as well, kind of separate. And but it is under-resourced, as my colleague mentioned, and I think this is going to be a key pillar to accelerate the technology development for many SMEs because they need these facilities. In my capacity as the CEO of North Vector Dynamics, where we make missiles, this is basically one of the only places that we can test, and so we need access and frequent access as well.
Well, Mr. Prezan, you're done. And
That's my fault.
and to the witnesses, thank you so much. We talked about Bill C-31, and it's coming up before the House now. It does incorporate the enactment, of course, of the Defense Industrial Agency as a standalone to facilitate and expedite the very things that you're talking about. But we do necessarily need to have expert advice and support and opposition to ensure we get it right. So thank you for being before us. Before I adjourn the meeting, tomorrow we have two meetings coming, informal meetings, one with the Ukrainian delegation. It's at 8:30 to 9:30 at West Block. I'm trying to gauge who around the table will be able to attend that meeting. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's important. Yeah. I would like to have some members from the opposition there too, of course, the Conservative Party. So let's make sure we have a good, because it's a good topic. I've invited some other members to attend. I've also invited some from the Senate to make sure they're available. I'm not sure if they'll be able to be there, but it's an important topic with the Ukrainian minister and so forth to be there. So, and then the next meeting is going to be at 1:15 with the state minister, the head of the Bavarian State Chancellery and delegation. And that's going to be in conjunction, I believe, with another committee. So we're there as observers more so than as enactors. The head of the Bavarian State Chancellery and Delegation, it's the state minister, Dr. Florian Herrmann. It's a joint meeting with Indu.
Province in Germany? Yes? Yes. We're meeting with provincial delegations now?
I know you Federalists, but I have.
Appel au règlement.
We
Appel au
will,
règlement.
Point of order, Chair.
Appel au règlement.
yeah, but if you can make that meeting, I'll try to be there as well for the 1:15, and it'll be in conjunction with another committee. And lastly, we have a trip coming forward. I would ask. I know it's not for these members, but we do have an outline of that trip. And the members that are on that trip are the ones that have been brought forward by your respective whips. The clerk wants us to make certain that you can, on your own account, go to the respective events. So let's make sure we deal with that so as there be no surprises, because I want all of us to be there if we can. The clerk is concerned about logistics, accommodation as well. So let's make sure that so let's make sure we have a good understanding before we proceed. I'm going to approve the clerk's, yes, Mr.
Yeah, just Mr. Chair, just have we got the outline of the trip yet? Because it's hard to talk to finance.
I have an outline of the dates and bookings. I don't have accommodations or meetings.
We have at least dates and where we're going to be?
Yeah, so I'll ask the clerk just to provide that to me and then share it with you as to who's, if you can accommodate, and if he can accommodate in the end, because he's citing some issues that may be of concern.
Baseball at midnight and daylight. And they do. They got midnight baseball league in Nunavut.
Monsieur Saint-Marie, est-ce que tu veux? Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, with your agreement, can we adjourn? Meeting adjourned.